In the early 23rd century, as humanity reached beyond their stellar cradle, 10 corporations came together, pooling their resources so that they might purchase a system of their own. Advertised to the public as the one and only colony owned and operated by distinguished corporate offices, guaranteeing full employment and presenting life in their colony as being well planned, perfectly balanced, with your career suited to your aptitude. You would live a life free from war, famine, or disease. And to oversee this new venture, a new corporation was formed, the Halcyon Holding Company, with its board of directors being drawn from its member companies. This board's first act was the construction of 2 colony ships, the Groundbreaker and the Hope. Each was built to the highest of corporate standards, through safe and effective cost-saving measures, like cutting redundancy programs. Each was built to hold hundreds of thousands of colonists, with the vast majority held in stasis throughout the journey, with a skeleton crew being left behind to maintain and operate the vessel over its 10-year journey. Of the 2, the Groundbreaker was the first to depart. They were to establish the framework for each of the planned settlements, with colonies being planned for Terra 1, 2, and Scylla, each being envisioned as a specialized venture, with Terra 1 projected to be the beating heart of industry, Terra 2 to be the breadbasket, and Scylla to be the colony's quarry. Upon their arrival, colonization and terraforming work began at once, and almost immediately these efforts faced setbacks, as the terraforming effort began to affect the native wildlife, seeing it growing into larger, more aggressive and ultimately deadlier forms. Still worse, the native plants proved not only inedible, but either as a result of the soil composition or through cross-pollination with the native species, those seeds and plants brought from Earth seemed to adapt to their new environment, with each generation possessing less and less nutritional content. The board quickly became aware of these issues and began to focus its efforts on other worlds in the Halcyon system. But as they did so, one of their members chose to remain on Terra 1, using legal loopholes to secure the world for themselves, in direct defiance of the board. Such open insubordination could not be tolerated and was met with an indefinite embargo, colony-wide propaganda campaign, and a permanent travel ban to the newly rechristened monarch. Even so, these measures did little to deter the crew of the colony ship Groundbreaker from utilizing their position at the edge of the Halcyon system, where they could oversee trade into and out of Halcyon to retain their legal independence. Long-term, the failure at Monarch and the defiance to Board's authority had the impact of costing the colony vast quantities of human and mechanical resources, tools, prefabricated structures, and machines that they could not produce themselves, a situation that was worsened with the failure of their hope to arrive. As the days turned to months and years, the ship was presumed lost with all hands. The cost of this loss would cascade over the coming decades and result in life throughout the colonies proving quite harsh. Settlements were constructed and wholly owned by individual corporate entities who cared little for their employees, their focus largely on ensuring that their colony kept to set quotas and generated profits. Most of these corporations impose stringent rules and regulation against the importation and use of outside products, with many outright banning the discussion of any outside corporate entity. And while this may maintain the balance of power on the board, it did little for the colony as a whole, keeping money cycling within their specific townships, limiting trade and ultimately undermining the greater colony's potential for economic development, with any and all gains being concentrated into the hands of the colonial elite, who in their decadent and blissful ignorance neglected all of the settlements, save to demand ever more be shipped to the capital of Byzantium. This demand, combined with general poor economic policies, has favored a quantity over quality mindset, leading local corporate overseers to look to any means of maintaining production, whether this be getting their entire workforce hooked on stimulants such as adrenatime, or in the case of Edgewater, where they were deprived of salt tuna for their canneries, where they have taken to canning everything. Minerals, mushrooms, wood chips, canids, and finally crushed stones, whatever it may be, to keep pace with production. Even though these alternatives come at a cost in terms of machinery and the health of their citizenry. Criticisms of such activities are met with claims of poor work ethic, and those who claim illness are met with accusations of laziness, subject to the local corporate overseer who holds the power to determine who is worthy and deserving of medical treatment. Such philosophies are not only ingrained within the corporate sphere, but also the law, culture, and religion of the people, with many choosing to work themselves to death, believing that if they work hard enough, everything will work out in the end. Such philosophies have done little to relieve the colony of its burdens. The board's presumption of the loss of the Hope would eventually be proven false, as the vessel was discovered floating adrift at the edge of Halcyon space, its prolonged voyage the result of a skip drive failure, eventually leading to the death of its crew, and those in storage having been in cryostasis for too long to be safely revived by established methods. And rather than seeking an alternative means of rousing them awake, the board chose to keep this discovery a secret, moving the vessel to orbit a desolate ice world and to be kept under continuous surveillance. Within their own ranks, they faced dissent over this decision. While many chose to remain silent in their objectives, one, a high-clearance scientist by the name of Phineas Wells, not only chose to break with his former associates, but chose to engage in an ongoing effort to revive the crew of the Hope. His actions were quickly deemed criminal by the board, for not only was he wasting critical resources, but he sought to introduce more mouths to feed within an already struggling colony. Wells was perhaps least of the board's problems. Faced with adrenatime-addled marauders engaging in violence throughout the colony, the sudden loss of contact with Earth, a lack of trade coming from other settled worlds, and a food supply that was increasingly unable to sustain the colony in the long run. They were beset on all sides. So the board sought and implemented experimental and extreme solutions. Diet suppressant toothpaste that could lead to blindness in order to curb the public appetite. An early retiree program that executed those that were no longer productive or otherwise contributing to the colony. Even going so far as to propose a system by which the populace would be placed into a period of hibernation, only to be periodically awakened to serve the board's needs. In short, Halcyon stands on a precipice, threatening to teeter into utter collapse. Now, perhaps the colony will prove fortuitous, and some unknown variable will be revived by Dr. Wells, and through their revival, they may revive the Hope, and this may provide the colony with the chance for a future. Or perhaps this is but the beginnings of a new dark age that has already begun to set upon the colony. And while thousands may die of starvation or see themselves return to stasis, while their settlements are reclaimed by nature, the board and the colonial elites of Byzantium will live out their days, gorging themselves on the colony's wealth.